And to find out more about the outcomes of that seminar, we're joined by Gushwell Brooks, Mandela Day and Public Outreach Head at the Nelson Mandela Foundation. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us, Mr. Brooks. So just looking at your stakeholders or those you chose to engage with, how are you framing the conversation? So goal 2 on zero hunger and goal 13 is on climate action. But are you able to conjoin this to say to people, for instance, if we look at the fight for scarce resources, are you saying it's because of climate change and food insecurity, or do you also talk about the dire socio-economic circumstances that people are confronted with?
Good evening, and good evening to the viewers. I think that we need to look at it holistically. You know, about a year ago, 2 years ago, the intern in the Mandela Day and outreach program, his name is Vukane Mzobe, did an interesting exercise, and he took the 17 SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, and what he had found was that they actually align completely with the work that we are doing in lessening poverty and inequity. Dealing with some of the biggest threats that we have, even from an environmental perspective, if one would want to look at it through those particular lenses. We impact on gender, we impact on education, we impact on so many levels. I think the key issue that we have to understand is that all of these issues are interlinked. So we can't look at poverty and inequity in isolation away from climate as well as from food security. The two are indeed interlinked. In fact, one of the biggest symptoms of poverty or of the climate, as well as a lack of food security, is in fact poverty. So I think that they're not in isolation, and I think the key notion here is that all the work that we are doing somehow ties back to those SDGs.
As you say, interrelated challenges which would need an approach, for instance, that would foster peace, preventing conflict. So how are you engaging in finding long-lasting solutions to these intermediate and some of them long-term impact threats? So they're complex but interrelated, but the final approach has to be risk reduction and response mechanisms and innovation. Tell us about some of this, how it came out. What do people see as coming from community level?
Indeed. I mean, the one issue that came up was the fact that you can't have a positive impact on conflict levels when people are in fact poor and disgruntled as a result. When they, empty bellies lead to anger. And unfortunately, that's the world that we are faced with today. In fact, our country is faced with that. If you look at the levels of violent crime, all too often a symptom and a cause, due to poverty. Not to be excused by poverty, but definitely caused by poverty. So I think it's something that we definitely have to take into account. The most exciting thing for me about the seminar, about this dialogue, getting together with all sectors of society, including the UN representing the international community, various elements of government, civil society, big business, Old Mutual, as you know, gave us massive support in this. ShopRite contributed to this discussion. When we look at community-based organizations participating in this, the beautiful thing was that all of them came together in that it wasn't just merely a talk shop, that all of them actually contributed to saying how they would contribute, making sure that this focus on the intersection between climate change and food security is actually dealt with. We have a major insurer saying that we're going to provide communities with information that fits with these big insurance companies around risk reduction. As you had highlighted, how do we make sure that people do not build in high flood areas, that they don't plant their gardens in those particular areas? How do we get government into, through the Department of the DFE, the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment, how do they then in turn provide information on good water usage, clean, and making sure that people have access to clean water? So it was a beautiful moment for me at the end of the seminar that we saw everyone coming together and said, this is what we do. as opposed to just this is what we've spoken about.
As you mentioned that the role players were wide, you spoke about the United Nations. One of the things that it says is that human activity has been in the main the driver of climate change. So I'm just wondering how then, if you are looking for those long-lasting, innovative solutions, whether it's from a government level or public policy or even investment, are you making communities part of the policy designers instead of policy implementers? Because it almost seems like a blame game when you say human activity and you're speaking to communities and not looking at the big corporate as well.
This impacts all of us. It's whether you're big business, whether you are, an ordinary member of society, whether you're part of an NGO, whether you're part of a faith-based community. It doesn't actually, quite frankly, matter. Climate change is definitely going to impact all of us. All of our food is insecure. All of us are seriously facing serious issues. I mean, even at the dialogue, I said that we are in serious trouble here, and that we need to find solutions, and that we need to work together to establish what those particular solutions are. So, this is definitely not a situation where you can have your cake and eat it. Going back to what you were saying about communities, it's very true, and it's an observation that my colleague Dr. Bruce Harmon's made, is that all too often what we do is that we speak on behalf of communities, we make decisions on behalf of communities instead of allowing them to be part of the conversation. This was different in that this seminar, as I said, included all sectors of society, and we heard from communities. More importantly, we allowed communities to actually give voice to say what it is that they are going to do. Instead of saying what it is that they need, what is it that they are going to do to contribute to this discussion around the climate change and on food security.
And I found it interesting to see that there were those who were involved in soup kitchens. So I want to talk about what they're saying and what they see as imperative in prioritizing resilience building measures within agricultural communities. What insight did you get from them? And also investing, are they going to be at the forefront of those climate smart agricultural practices and projects that are being spoken of?
Indeed. In fact, we commissioned the Nelson Mandela Foundation, again with the assistance of Old Mutual, commissioned a report from Nelson Mandela University, and that particular report indicates the communities are already taking those mitigating factors or actions into account, where you see people planting drought-resistant crops, that they've actually adjusted their means of production, where at times they might plant a bit later and might harvest a bit earlier as a result of unreliable rainfall. Because also often you find that these communities do not have access to irrigation in whatever shape or form. So I think that those inputs are already there. Of course, the university also helped with technology that they've developed to be able to measure moisture levels within the soil, what type of soil it is, to ensure that the right type of crops are planted there. So, and going back to the issue of the soup kitchens that you highlight, community kitchens, as we prefer to term it, those community kitchens play an essential role in members that do not have incomes or immediate access to food. However, the food needs to come from somewhere, and so we have this long-term sustainable process where food is grown by community gardens, in turn supplied to these community kitchens, and those community kitchens are in turn obviously the most hungry immediately. But of course, we can't just play within that ecosystem. We need community gardens to be in a position whereby they can take their food to market. One of the key things that stood out to me is a major retailer saying that, you know what, we need to provide an opportunity for small-scale farmers in a close set to get some education around how do they aggregate their produce so that we can buy it on. Definitely these are the most amazing opportunity, the outcome of this dialogue, and why it makes such a major impact, and why it was so valuable for me.
Well, thank you so much for speaking to us, Gushwell Brooks, who is with the Nelson Mandela Foundation, speaking to us about a seminar that we've just had on food security and climate change. We're going to leave it here for now. Back again in just a moment. Do stay with us. This is The Late Edition.